Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this Q&A to follow the film The Most Magnificent Thing in our Love and Teamwork Animation for All Shorts program. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of our special guests today. I want to welcome the director, Arna Selznick, and one of the producers, Lynne Warner, and the writer and illustrator of the book, The Most Magnificent Thing, that this film is based on, Ashley Spires. Hi guys. Thank you so much for joining us today from all over many different places. And Arna, I can't help but notice that you actually seem to be sitting in a very special room that looks familiar to me.
Sitting in the girls' room.
You are in the girls' room.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah,
see her. She's got a little montage of things up on the wall, and I thought it would be an appropriate background today.
It's perfect background. Thank you. It took me a second. I was like, where is she? I was like, I think, and I was like, oh, I recognize the room because it was the hanging. Is that like a little dragonfly or a plane that's hanging?
Yeah, it's a plane, and there's a dragon as well.
Ah, fantastic.
When I move, I kind of, you'll lose me, but that's...
I know, but it's worth it.
A rocket and a plane. Designed by our great prop designer.
That's wonderful. Well, so I'd like to start off just kind of with the origin. If I could start with Ashley as the origin story for this film. How did you come up first with the idea for the story and these characters, and then also maybe how you felt about it being turned into a film?
Okay. Well, like most ideas, it kind of started as an accident. I had a whole other story that I was trying to make work, and it wasn't working. And I very much experienced everything that the girl goes through in the film and the book. So I was trying to make it work, and it wasn't working, and I got wildly frustrated, and I did the very dignified thing of laying on my studio floor and crying for a while because that's part of the creative process. And then I realized that instead of trying to force this other story that wasn't working, maybe the story was my experience. And I had seen this whole process go through all the kids that I work with in schools when they're trying to draw something and it doesn't turn out just right. And I thought, this is the story. And so the next day I got on the phone and pitched it to my editor, and she's like, yes, I think we've got something there. And so it was a bit of a departure for me in terms of my books, because most of my books have a goofy little character and here's this character's name in the world. But this was very much a story about an experience, which is why the girl remained unnamed, because she's everybody and she didn't necessarily need a name. So girl and dog were everyone who goes through this type of experience. So the book was wildly well received. Teachers have glommed onto it, and I can't thank educators around the world enough. It's in, I want to say 19 different languages now around the world as well. So it's been very successful. And I think that might be why Nelvana just was like, hey, maybe we could do something with this. So as a kid, I was the one who wanted to be an animator when I grew up. And it was an absolute dream to have my work get to go on the big screen like this. And it's amazing when you're an illustrator, you see your characters running through your head for years, but now that everybody else gets to see her running around and the dog bouncing and doing things, seeing the dog do everything the dog does on the screen after he's been living in here for so long was just an absolute dream. Awesome. Yeah.
So maybe Lynne, do you want to talk a little bit about, as a producer, about how Nelvana picked up the story, and then maybe how Arna became involved with the project?
Well, Nelvana predominantly does series, but from time to time we do something with a longer format in mind. And we had wanted to do something of a longer format. And there was some discussion, and this book came up because of the universal theme that Ashley just spoke about. And we decided to go with it. And then Arna was brought in as a director. We did... at the time, talk a lot about being women-centric. The author is a woman, so we thought it would be nice to have a woman director, and there were two of us women producers, so that's sort of how it started.
And Arna, how did it come to you, and how did you know this was a film you wanted to work on?
Actually, the other producer on the project, Pamela Slavin, approached me, and we had worked together on the Little Bears series in 1998. And so she wanted to work with me again, and she asked me if I was interested in doing either this project or another one that she pitched me to, and we kind of gravitated towards this short, because the story it has that essential quality that sort of appeals to everyone. And it also was, I was working in features, And this was going to be a feature quality short, so it looked like a good fit for me. So I was honored to be asked to do it.
Great job, you did. We don't really see that many images or stories of girls and women building and creating things so much. And such a great
exactly.
job. With both the girl and her mom. So maybe both, like, what was your main motivation for writing and adapting it, with that as a focus? Maybe Ashley, do you want to talk a little bit about just even conceiving it that way? Because when you talk about your creative process, like obviously they could have been any kind of project, but it felt so tangible and so significant the way that you described it.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big believer in picture books being an allegory of any kind of experience. And so while my experience was trying to create a book or trying to create an illustration just right, I changed it to make it a bit more visceral, because kids are visceral and they build things and they like to make things. So that's why I have the character building something sort of more engineering. I am in no way an engineer. That's where my imagination comes. And as far as having a girl be the one do the building, what's interesting is that I never conceived of it as anything different, because it's me. And I make things and I am a woman. And so it's very interesting when the book came out, the kind of reception it received, completely unintentional, to be honest, because as a nouveau feminist, I just made it about a girl making stuff because girls make stuff. And I didn't think it was a revolutionary idea until everyone started going, hey, we haven't seen that enough. And I loved that the film was able to expand that so much more by bringing Mom and her creative pursuits in line with the character. I thought that was a great thing. I didn't have the room to do that in my book. And so it was so wonderful that the film was able to expand on women of all ages being creators and going through that sometimes excruciating process of creating.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that a little, Arna? Because there's a lot of empowering female roles in this film, in addition to the mom and the girl. There's a girl playing hockey in the street. There's the artist in the park. There's the neighbor with the leaf blower. Like, talk a little about how
So exactly. That's so my husband and creative partner, John Van Bruggen, is the screenwriter of The Most Magnificent Thing. And he started off by working with Ashley on the story Document. They worked, I think it was in December of 2016 when you guys were working together. And then John started writing right after Christmas, January 2017. And we often kind of bounce ideas back and forth between us. And I know I was starting as a director. So while I was building with the crew, we were building the first character paths and the locations. We went ahead and did that as John was writing. So it was kind of coordinated. And we knew that we needed a mom in the story, because otherwise the girl is kind of a latchkey kid. And we wanted to make sure that she had a supportive network. And so John's idea was really to expand the mom and make her into an architect, which is something that I had always wanted to be. So I get to do that viscerally.
Didn't know that.
And yeah, so it was kind of like, okay, she's an architect. She's got a challenge. And then we also wanted to make sure that the creative process was kind of mirrored with Mom's creative process and the girl's creative process. So John did a lot of work on developing the arc of the story, trying to make sure it was always true to what Ashley had originally created. And it's one of those things where, as we went along, it was about a 4 or 5 months process, the screenwriting process, while we were designing and building the locations. We decided actually on the location would be a small cul-de-sac where the girl lived. She had friends she could hang out with, and also a park, which was a place where it was a safe place to go for a walk with the dog. So the whole story is set in the film in this small area that we had to build it in computer generated animation. That's what you do. And so we had to kind of come up with, how can we make this story vibrant and true to what our audience is going to feel, and it's at the same time true to the book. And Ashley, of course, you had done a very linear drawing style where we have a black and white, and we see beautiful buildings behind the girl, but we don't really know where it is. So we decided to set it in Toronto, a fictionalized Toronto, where we were all working. And so John immediately glommed onto that and went with that. And so as we built the story back and forth, bouncing ideas around, it developed into what you see on the film.
Yeah, I love that neighborhood vibe, you know, just like even that little cul-de-sac, but you get so much. And it felt, from an American standpoint, it felt so Canadian. It felt so lovely.
You have the CN Tower in the background in the final shot. Got permission from them to put it
Oh,
in.
really?
Yeah.
And you threw in some West Coast stuff in there too, because Emily Carr is in there.
Emily Carr is in there. Yes, that's right.
And I went to Emily Carr University out here, so that was extra special. So there's lots of little Canadian tidbits in there.
So can you talk a little bit about Emily Carr? Because I don't think she's as well known here in the States. And, you know, that just the choice to have that large statue there in the middle that's very clearly identified as her, I thought was just really remarkable. Can you tell us a little bit more about her?
Yeah. So Ashley, do you want to go on that one? Do you have a background?
Probably not a ton, but she's a famous painter up here. She was part of the group of 7, and she lived particularly, I think, on the Gulf Islands out here in British Columbia, where I am. And she had a monkey, which is why she has a monkey on there. And she's impressionist painting. What is?
I would say that it's Emily Carr's style is pretty unique. I wouldn't say it's totally impressionist. She did a lot of forests. She followed the native population, a lot of what we call totem poles. I'm sure they have a better name for it, but she painted very almost, I would say, almost holy pictures, like holy in reverence of the natural world. And that's what she had, lots of pets, but the monkey stands out. So, and there is an actual statue, not the one we created, but there is an actual statue, because she was an artist and she sat with her monkey often. I think it's in Victoria and it's quite famous. So we tried to copy that. And Yela Paxton Harding, who is our art director, built that. He modeled that, Emily Carr. I made some sketches. He took it from there, and it's a central piece of our park. So I think it works pretty well.
Yeah. Great. Is there an Emily Carr statue in a park somewhere in Canada?
In Victoria, BC, yes, there is. You can find it.
Because I've been to Victoria. I feel like it seemed familiar to me, because I thought I must have seen it there.
Yeah.
Oh, so great. So I also love the way that you illustrated the girl's imagination, and especially how you illustrated her temper tantrum and bad feelings. Can maybe Arna, Ashley, you each talk about how you chose to demonstrate those ideas and emotion in both the book and the film? Because I think that tapping into that experience is what makes it so viscerally, you know, powerful, and just really something that everyone, like you said, can relate to. It's everybody.
Yeah.
I got to ask you, Ashley, when you came up with the temper tantrum, did those images just pop out at you, or did you find you had to work at coming up with the book images of her?
I quit.
They were pretty method, I got to be honest. You know, I was feeling those feelings. Interestingly, actually, when it came to the book, when it came to her temper tantrum, my publisher, my editor was like, oh, you know, we don't like to show kids having a hissy fit. Like, that's not something we want to promote. I'm like, but it happens. So why not have her have it and then learn how to come out of it? That's
right.
kind of the point.
And it's okay to do it.
Yeah. And so, yeah, there were, you know, the big scribble above her head. It's pretty, again, it's very visceral. It's very like, and her hands being too big was actually a really great idea coming from my editor when she was thinking about her own kids going through that experience, and those sort of clumsy hands. So there were lots of those types of things that we did in our illustrations, but I you know, it was so different when you transfer it to film. Mm-hmm. And what I particularly love, and I know Arna's going to address it in a second, was that imagination when what did you guys call it again?
The bad feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But no, when she was creating something, creatovision. Creatovision. I love that. Like, everything else fell away, and she took the pieces and they spun around her. And that also, to me, is again something I can't do in my illustrations, but is absolutely something as a creative person you do. You close your eyes, everything else falls away, and you move those pieces around in your imagination till they fit. So I think both those things were very beautifully illustrated in the film.
Yeah, well, John Van Bruggen, the screenwriter, came up with both the bad feelings and creatovision. Those are completely new ideas that we added to the film to visualize what you had basically given us in the book. And yeah, and then Yela took the creative vision and worked with it. We talked a lot about all of the options. How can we illustrate it? Because we've got this great description in the book of these things flying around, in the script rather, of these things flying around. John had been very specific. You know, they rise up and they spin around her. And then to illustrate it, we ended up going with the black void. So when she's, and these glowing shapes. And Yela came up with a nuke treatment. Nuke is a program that you use it's associated with computer-generated animation, which we were using. And we basically loved what he pitched to me. He just came up to me one day and said, I think I got something. And this is after like 4 months of all kinds of options. And he just said, what do you think of this? And I went, okay, that's it. So yeah, it was, you know, we had a great team working on this. We had a lot of people who put in so much of their own personal experience, because everybody identified with the creative challenge of a journey in the creative process is always like this. You always start off, you think, yeah, easy peasy, I'm going to do that, no problem. And then you run into
and you go,
the issues, and then you go, ah. So, and I mean, we were absolutely adamant we were going to show that breakdown. That was so important. That was the climax of our film. And I think it really, the kids relate, adults relate, and you can see, you know, when she says, I quit, I'm no good at this, I quit. That is so, everyone has that. So yeah, so
use those exact words.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing to me is the girls thinking that she knows exactly what she's going to make and it being the perfect thing, and then that process too of her figuring out that the dog needs something else and what she, you know. So can you talk a little bit about that part of the story, Ashley, as far as thinking you know what the perfect thing is, and then that discovery process too? I thought that was a really sweet component of that relationship with the dog too.
Well, that's something that sort of changed a little bit between the film and the book. So in the book, right off the top, she knows what she's going to build. And so she's trying to build the sidecar and she can't get it to look just right or work just right. And so that was something that everybody sort of made a decision to change a little bit in the story, in the film, just I think to make it a little bit more visually interesting and a little bit more exciting for the viewer. But yeah, I mean, I think either way though, it's the same kind of idea where like Arna said just now, it's easy peasy. I have this plan. It's going to be like, no problem. I'm going to crank this thing out. No worries. And even if you have the idea or if the idea isn't quite what it should have been, either way, you're going to have to try over and over and over again. And you're going to have to leave yourself open to it changing and morphing. And whether it be the idea or the method of building, it's always going to have to change. And you're going to have to leave yourself open for that in order to successfully create anything, right? So Arna, you can talk a little bit more about why that sort of...
Yeah, so when we went through the process, we wanted to make sure we could see, like we built all the objects in that film, and we used a kind of a technique. I'm just going to go into that, and I'll come back to this idea that we're talking about the struggle, the creative struggle. But our objects were all slightly wonky because we wanted to make it look like a made by hand kind of film. We didn't want it to be too cool and perfect, as computer-generated things often can be. So when we wonkified everything, we wanted to make everything look like the girls. She's really in there doing it, and it helped for us to have the process look very real and very like anybody could say, oh yeah, she's actually turning that wrench, and she's hammering,
tightening the screw,
sawing, and you see sawdust, and all those things. That's part of the experience of the making that I wanted to make sure we had our audience was able to relate to. So, and I mean, you do that in the book. You know, she's hammering, and it's a lovely moment when she's putting all these things together. And so we wanted to expand on that. And then her struggle, her conflict was that she has this very best friend, the dog, and he's her mirror. He does everything with her and evokes all her emotions. And when she starts to get more and more involved, she gets this beautiful little toolbox from her mom as a gift, and that's the catalyst for the film to make her journey more about, I'm going to make something and it's going to be magnificent. Her mom has used that word and she loves that word and she wants to make something magnificent. So there she goes. She's got her goal for the day. She's going to make something magnificent. No problem. I know how to do this. She takes her toolbox outside, and the first thing she does is she decides she's going to make something for her little dog. So she's focused on the dog and he's focused on her. And then what happens as the film gets further along, they become further and further apart. So because she's no longer focusing on the person, her dog, the individual that she was making this special, magnificent thing for. And so that's where she sort of drops the ball and wants to make something magnificent, but she loses the point of her goal, which was to make something for her best buddy dog. And only when she finally has a breakdown, when she realizes he doesn't want any of the things I'm making for him, why can't you like it? And then they go for a walk, which he brings her the leash, and they go for a walk in the park, and she gains a new perspective. And that's when she comes back and realizes, oh, I think I know how to make something for you, you meaning the dog. You want to be with me all the time and you're tired from all this bouncing around and doing, and I'll make something that you can be with me all the time. And so what she ends up making that is truly magnificent is something not grand. It's not the castle. It's not the musical doghouse. And it's not that crazy thing that she makes at the end out of frustration. It's just a sidecar for her dog. And it's what he needs. And, you know, it's a kind of a lovely, that's how the book ends, and that's how our story ends. It's kind of this lovely wrap up where you see that's what's really magnificent, and making something for somebody you really care about. So I hope that answered the question I might have wanted.
Very sweet. How did you get Whoopi Goldberg as a narrator? And did you have any trouble getting her on board for the project? Or?
Lynne, you want to talk about that?
We actually didn't have any difficulty. I think it surprised us as well. I mean, we wanted somebody, a woman, possible, associated with a strong voice and recognizable, which obviously she is, as soon as you hear her start to speak. And we just approached her. We sent her the book and the script, and I have to say she was absolutely lovely to work with and a pleasure. You know, she when we finished the record, she actually spent like another half hour speaking with Arna and I and our other producer, Pam, and just talking. We had to go down to New York, and it was great.
Yes,
yeah, it was lovely working with Whoopi, and she just seemed to understand how to be a supportive voice in the story, and she had a very warm and kind of wry, ironic approach. You know, she has that comedic delivery. This is not a laugh out loud story, but I think she brought a warmth and a genuineness to it, and I thought she was great. She was very, very nice to work with, and she's very experienced at animation, so she knew everything she needed to do in terms of modulating her voice and keeping it clear. So it was lovely. Also, we had, I mean, with our mom character, we had, sorry, I'm just looking.
Allison Hill,
who is, she's a new mom. She was a new mom when she did this role, so she really identified with it. And Lily Bartlam, who was our girl. She was exceptional. We did interview quite a few girls, potential girls, and Lily just stood out right away. She just had that energy and that determination, and also I just love the sound of her voice. She's wonderful.
Yeah, I think.
Oh yeah, and Tony, who did the dog, who actually has more lines
than anybody.
else.
Yeah.
So I mean, he was just so good at Tony Daniels at capturing. He actually recorded to picture, so he had to sync all of his little barks and whimpers and yelps to an existing animated picture, and he's phenomenal.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget when watching animation how significant the casting process is, and the voices are as they would be if they were acting on screen. And
yes.
Yeah.
And for this project, we did it a little differently. I mean, quite often we record the voices before there's anything really to see. And then the storyboard is done having the voices in their head because they can hear them. But we actually guide tracked much of the script first, meaning we didn't use our final talent, but used stand-in actors. And so we had a guide to animate with. So when both Whoopi and Allison were recorded, we had a lot of animation done. So they were actually able to see the characters as they existed. And I think they really got a kick out of that. So it was a lot further along in that stage. So it worked out quite well.
So Arna, you've had a pretty amazing career as a director and story artist for animated films, dating back to what the Care Bears movie in 1984. Can you tell us how long, like what you've been, what project you've worked on and your experience as an because it's.
Well, I started, first time I worked at Nelvana. I've been at a lot of other studios, but the first time I worked at Nelvana was 1980, and I came on as a layout artist for Rock and Rule. And if anybody knows that film, it's a cult favorite. It's a 2D animated film. And about mice in an apocalyptic city. they're musicians, and it was great. I mean, you just walk into the studio and everybody was dressed anyway the way you want. It was like a little mini town of its own, very, very friendly. And I just felt like, oh, these are my people. I'm home now. Artists. I'm working with artists. So yeah, I worked on as a layout artist for over a year on Rock and Rule, and then I became a story supervisor and a director of several different films, and I guess it was 3 years later. I can't remember whether we did the Inspector Gadget first or after Care Bears movie. It's all a blur. So yeah, I supervised the Inspector Gadget series, which was 64 half hours we had to do in 9 months of storyboard and shipping overseas to Japan so it could be animated there. And then I believe I did the Care Bears movie, which was another, ironically enough, these are all 9 months projects. This is so weird. I just realized that. So we had to do a feature in 9 months, which was insane.
That is.
And I mean, for me, looking back on the Care Bears movie, that was my first feature and my first really big directing gig. And I was just thrown into the deep end and, okay, well, I gotta swim now. It was lucky I had a lot of good people to ask a lot of questions and learn a lot. And that's pretty much how my career has developed since then. I've done storyboards for different feature films. I've directed like the Little Bear series, second and third season. Directed a Franklin special and The Most Magnificent Thing. And right now working on developing a story of my own that I've written out and had some designers working on already, and I'm beginning the board. And I'm also working right now, very proud to be able to work on a feature film with Jim Capobianco. He's making a film. It's out there. Everybody knows about it. I think that who's looking at it as it's a story of Leonardo da Vinci, and he's been working on it. It'll be a stop motion film, and I'm doing storyboard on it right now. So
that's so great to hear, because
opportunity.
Jim's local to here in the Bay Area, and I remember when he did his short film Leonardo years ago. That we featured. Yeah, that's so great to hear that he's working on a feature.
Yeah, it's a Kickstarter project. He's raising money. Actually, well, by the time this comes out, it will have been finished, but they're on their final push right now.
Fantastic. And when you first started making films, was it uncommon at all for a woman to direct animated features? Because I know it certainly is here in the U.S., and I'm just wondering if that's improved in the last few decades, or what your experience has been in that capacity.
I think with all of the women now coming up in animation, it won't be uncommon in the future. It was for me. I didn't have the education background I didn't go to Sheridan. Sheridan was very new when I started. They were just graduating their first few years. And before that, it was all a learn by doing process. And because I'd been an artist drawing all my life, I think I sort of just fell into it in a way. It was a good fit for me. And of course, I had to learn a lot on the job. Now people are trained when they come to Nelvana or any other studio. You've got 3 or 4 years of training at an animation school. It'll be either Sheridan or some other school like that. And I think there are so many more women in the field now that I'd be very surprised. And well, there are. I mean, there's like, we have Janet, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting her name, Judith Gruber Spitzer, who is our
Composer.
our composer, and her partner Janet, who's works at the NFB. The NFB always produces with women. There's so many women there. And then as far as in the States, I can't speak for the different studios there, but I think, I mean, there are more women now than there ever have been in animation.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely over
Go
time.
ladies.
Yeah, yeah. And NFB is the National Film Board of Canada, right? Which is yes, something that's very special that you guys have that we don't. That's one of the supported animation and women animators, I think, for a very long time that we don't have here. But I think, you know, companies like Pixar and even and Disney and Lucasfilm have really made some strides.
Yeah. Nora Twomey in Ireland, who's done quite a few wonderful films working with Cartoon Saloon. And she did the beautiful film, I'm just also blanking on the name of that film, for the story of the Afghan.
Breadwinner.
Yes. So that was Nora's film. So, yeah, so there are, I mean, I didn't come prepared with a list, but I'm sure you can find
whatever's off the cuff. Now, just, you know, knowing that you've been in the business for a very long time, and that I think it didn't used to be the case that there were as many. And certainly I know in the state, you know, that it was a big deal when Brenda Chapman was directing Brave for Pixar. That was going to be the first woman directing a fefeature film for Pixar, and then she ended up not directing it. You know, so it's been a thing. And, you know, we have at the festival, we have a gender equity initiative we've had for the last 5 years called Mind the Gap, to really kind of address the number of, you know, women filmmakers that we show in the festival, and trying to have at least 50% of our films by women filmmakers. So it was supposed to be 50-50 by 2020, and we actually are at 57% for this year's festival.
Wow.
You guys are all part of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So Ashley, what are you working on now? What's your next project?
I'm working on a giant graphic novel, a 200-page graphic novel called Goth Unicorn. It's sort of semi-autobiographical. But, yeah, I had a book second in my fairy science series, came out a couple weeks ago, and then I've just finished a couple books that are coming out next year. So now I'm working on the ones for 2022 now. So I work pretty far ahead, much like film and television. And another of my series is actually, my graphic novel series is actually a television series with Nelvana as well, Binky the Space Cat. And so I have my fingers crossed we get a season 2 on that.
Well, I just want to thank you all so much for this lovely film, for taking the time to talk to us. It's been really fun talking to all of you and hearing more about your work. It's been great. So thank you. And
you're welcome.
We're very honored to be part of the Mill Valley Festival.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Take care.